This is the Convergent Science Network podcast. Leading researchers in the domain of neuroscience, brain theory, and technology are interviewed by Paul Verschure and Tony Prescott.
Okay. This is Paul Verschure with the Convergent Science Network podcast. And I'm here with Stefano Ferraina, who was one of our speakers in our summer school today. And Stefano, you talked about logical neurons for logical reasoning. What does it exactly mean?
Yeah, to me, it's the first evidence. I mean, at least in the neurophysiological literature on non-human primates, that neurons in the brain are able to code for a logical property. That is the one that is related to the transitive inference task.
Okay, so we're talking monkeys here, primates,
yeah,
right? And so what you're trying to assess is, okay, what's the logical capability of the monkey as an organism, and how much that can we recover in the neural response. So what's exactly the task that you were studying?
Yeah, the task is named as a transitive inference task, has been used in different forms in many types of animals. In few words, is the ability to conclude that A is higher than C after learning that A is higher than B and B higher than C.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
To conclude that the first one is necessary to have a kind of relationship between all the value presented, and then to be able to argument, to obtain more information that those are provided at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's like you have a sequence of magnitudes, let's say, and you learn to make inferences about these relationships.
Correct.
Right. And when you drew a parallel to the social life of certain kinds of primates. Was it just to introduce the topic, or do you really see this as reflecting a need that they have in the wild?
No, it was a way to introduce, but it's also true that in the other animals where the property of transitive inference has been shown, this is always stronger, more evident in animals that are used to live in social organized groups.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So there
and
might be
there
a
is
correlation.
one of study that compared two types of birds, very similar in the species, but since one of the two lives normally in large group, while the second one is as a group very reduced, the evidence is in this study was that the transitive inference properties was more evident in the one living in large organized groups.
Okay. So now the specific task that the monkey was exposed to was essentially using different kinds of shapes.
Yep.
Fairly abstract shapes. And you would present pairs of shapes, and then one of them would lead to reward in the training phase, right? Would give reward. The second one would not give reward. And then in the next pair, you would take, let's say, the second pattern that didn't get reward. You would present it with the third pattern.
Yeah.
And then the second pattern would get reward, and the third one wouldn't get reward, etc. And that's how you go down the chain, right?
Yeah.
So we have a certain specific sequence. And then in the test phase, you present the animals now with randomly selected pairs of the whole sequence that they were trained on.
Including those trained.
Exactly. And then they have to choose the one that would give them more reward than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the whole task. So what do you then really observe when monkeys perform this task? How good are monkeys at this task?
Actually, surprisingly, the monkey were very good on performing, on learning the general idea of the task of this and acquiring the strategy. After less than 3 weeks of initial training, both monkeys we used were able to play with figures, to recognize by trial and error that there is an imposed series that the experiment presented to them, and then to use this information also at the moment of the test when novel figures, never matched figure during training are presented, like concluding in a sequence from A to F, who is the rewarded one between B and E.
Mm-hmm. Right. But now in the training, what kind of, if we talk about a difference in reward magnitude, that's the amount of juice you get. If you go to the stimulus, the pattern with the highest reward and lowest reward, what's the difference in reward? What kind of magnitude?
We never introduced this variable to the task. That is actually interesting and could be explored in the future. At least this is our hope. But to say differently, the amount of reward was always the same. Mm-hmm. For each pair, there was a rewarded symbol and the unrewarded one. So there was never a symbol with the strong amount of reward and the other one with less. Mm-hmm. So that the comparison was always relative within each pair. Mm-hmm. And the series was created because the different pair were presented consecutively.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that would mean in your test phase, you cannot combine all possible patterns, because then you would have two patterns that in that sequence would never have been rewarded or would always have been rewarded.
No, in the test, all the comparisons are compared. Mm-hmm. I mean, all the pairs, all the possible pairs are compared.
Okay. So that would mean you might present patterns that in the combination would never have been rewarded in any way.
Well,
that's not true.
No, it's not true, because the only one figure on a sequence of 6 using letter is E.
Mm-hmm.
F is F. Mm-hmm. The F is never rewarded during the learning.
Exactly.
While A is always rewarded. So one easy conclusion is that it's very easy. It's very simple for the monkey to conclude when A and E are present in the test. But our data show that it's not true. It's not just a simple relationship between reward history and logical assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the question again?
No, so my question is just about the test, whether there's not a bias in the test, because like you say now, in its stimulus, F is never rewarded.
Yeah.
So in some sense, there are probe trials where you have pairs that include stimulus F, which would be much easier to evaluate than if you would have any other combination of stimuli from A to E.
Yeah, but still having E and F that are adjacent in the pair presentation when during learning is sometimes, because the performance is a probabilistic, sometimes more difficult than comparing B and F, even if F is always there and F was never rewarded.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a surprising effect that you found, right? That if you now do these test trials and we present combinations of stimuli, if you would have A and B, there in terms of reaction time, the monkey might take longer to make a decision than if you would present A or A and E, right? So how do you explain that? Why would that be?
This is right. The one was expecting that those figure more presented during learning are the one more easily coded. And this is not what emerged from the behavioral data. The behavioral data shows that comparing figures that are more far located in the series is absolutely easier for the animal. So this is quite a surprise. That according to some people that presented model in the literature, this is probably due to the noisy representation of each symbol in the series. And then comparing two very close symbols that are noisy is much more complicated because of the noise when that comparing two symbols that are far located.
But could it not be an interference effect of multiple memory systems?
It's an interference. I think interference and the noisy, it's the same, because noisy means that the symbol is not very well coded when you compare the code to the very close to them, to the other symbol very close to them in the series. So if there is no noise, it means that they are very well classified.
Yeah, but
so
noise,
if they are not very well classified, there is interference.
Sure, but don't you agree that noise is a bit of dissatisfactory explanation of variability in nature? Because basically we're not actually explaining anything. We just say, well, there's some uncontrollable variability here. Well, you could also argue that maybe the strange thing is if I'm being trained on a certain pair A-B, right, and I'm being tested on A and C or A and B, and I compare my reaction time or my accuracy, it's worse on A and B. So I could argue, well, maybe since I'm instantaneously confronted with A and B in the training set, it's also a pattern association mechanism that comes into play. There's a perceptual mechanism that comes into play. It says, well, maybe A and B is, let's see, one category. Okay. And now I get two competing memory-dependent processes, right? One telling you something about, let's say, the magnitude order, the order of presentation, and the interference comes from a process that not all these things belong together, let's say. So that you really have interference between specific cognitive processes as opposed to a non-specific noise with a decision-making stage.
I agree. I actually believe that there are different levels of representation. One is that represent the single symbol are represented in the brain. The other one is that the pair starts to be represented.
Right. Okay.
Since the figure B is present in both A, B, and B, C, and in the two cases the probability of reward is 50%. Then the representation in the pair need to be because it's much more convenient, more noisy than the representation on the single item.
Right.
So at the time when the monkey is required to answer which one is linked to the reward of the never presented, the never experienced pair, for the monkey it's very easy because there was no code, no previous code assigned to them. So there is no ambiguity because it's not part of the A-B-B-C conflict. It's a B-D. So the monkey for the monkey the job is easier. But this is my point.
Okay.
To try to figure out what's the category of the pair based on the even in the conflicting experience, but based on previous experience.
Because one interpretation could also be you might interpret a single stimulus presentation as, let's say, an episode, a memory episode, right? In which everything comes together. It's okay, I saw these two patterns together, and now I see some other patterns together. So then those episodes might be then chained together in the sequence, right? So, and that comparisons between episodes and within episodes are actually very different processes. That's essentially what you're seeing.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah? Okay, but then you made also, I think, an important point to in terms of, because you want, for you this data is pointing to an ability for logical operations. Now for that you must exclude an interpretation that would say, well, this is just reward. Dependent on the reward that you receive, you form certain associations between events, and it's just a very direct recall of these associations. So how can you exclude this interpretation?
The approach that we use that is referred to other similar approach in the literature is that we asked the monkey to learn two different chains. And in this case, the history or reward is distributed differently in the two chain. And then at the end of the learning of the two separate chains, we asked the monkey to link the two chains by providing them the relative value of the extremes. That means C in the ABC chain and D in DEF chain. And the evidence shows that the monkey is still expressing behaviorally the same performance than when the chain is unique, even if the reward is not any more uniformly distributed to explain the relative value only based on this attribute.
Right.
So we conclude that probably the monkey is not only basing their conclusion on the reward, but is also using the information provided previously differently.
And this kind of chaining test.
Yeah.
So let's say we have two sequences, like you say, ABC, and with DEF, and now suddenly I present the monkey with B and E as a pair, right, to evaluate. Does the monkey immediately respond to that correctly, or they have to learn that this is now a relevant question?
Unfortunately, I have no answer to this question because we haven't looked to this data, this level of detail. But I know from all of our data that during the task, the monkey continue to learn, but this is normal.
Of course.
So I don't know if in the chain experiment there is already the evidence of the link between the two.
No, because so your point is, look, that they can do this that they perform well in the chain experiment would require some form of reasoning. Let's say a deliberation. Would say, well, no, I had to have this sequence ABC, and this was the other sequence DEF. Now E was later than B in the learning phase. So now I know I have to choose for B, right? But you could also argue that maybe again this is a perceptual learning process, because now the first time I see B and E, so the two exemplars from the two different sequences, I don't know what to do. Let's say, but they're presented together. They're now conjunctive, and dependent on my choice, I get reward or no reward. So I could learn a new contingency. Yeah. So how could you exclude that interpretation?
Again, I'm not able to exclude it without looking at the trials on the first trials of the test.
Okay.
But I bet also that you do agree that this is not simple as sensory motor transformation of the symbol in the response. I mean, there is something that is more than associating symbols to response. So when the overall effect of the symbolic distance effect, that is the performance that changes with the distance between the symbols that are supposed to be located in the mental space differently, and this behavioral effect is still there after linking two different chains. I think it's a good argument in favor of. It's not a conclusion. And,
no, that's indeed interesting, right? So we have these alternative interpretations, and we can come back to that later. But indeed, what you subsequently showed is that the two main phenomena you then looked at was what you called symbolic distance and serial distance, and you compared the two, right? So what's the difference between what is symbolic distance and what is serial distance? How are they different?
Yeah, the symbolic distance is defined as the effect in the behavioral measure, that is the measures that are the reaction time and the performance. That is essentially better. I mean, the performance increase and the reaction time is reduced when the symbols to be compared are more distant each other. So comparing B and E is easier than comparing the learned one, B and C pair.
Right.
So this is the symbolic distance effect. It's a very strong effect that has been previously described in humans too, and it's common to other quantity comparison, like in the numerical literature. So again, in the numerical literature, when a subject is asked to compare between a number, that is 5 as a reference in the first 10, and 6 or 5 and 8, normal subjects have more difficulty on concluding that 6 is higher than 5 than 8 is higher than 5. The second effect is the serial position effect. That is the evidence that in the learned series, the different symbols are not represented equally, but they are some way organized around a center. That is, in our case, the letter C. That stay on the middle of the series.
But before we go to that point, just about the if we look at symbolic distance, and we now take the case that we're linking two sequences together, right? Now that the only sticking point I have is that if I have a 3-element sequence ABC, that the combination C with anything from the second sequence is now an inconsistent pairing compared to everything else, because C was never rewarded.
Correct.
Right? So is that how is that exception handled in terms of the performance of the monkey? Because it's like an exception that they must handle, right?
Yeah, it's true that you're referring to local phenomena, while unfortunately we analyzed our behavioral data at the global level.
Okay, all clear.
So I think it's important to remember that what is one of the strategy that I suppose our animal were able to learn. That is that there is no absolute value of every symbol presented. It's the same of at the time when B is presented for the first time with a B is never reinforced in the block design of the learning.
Exactly.
But then right after, B is presented together to C, and now is B reinforced.
Yeah.
So for the message that is provided to the animal is that warning. There's a warning. The value of the symbol in terms of probability of getting reward could be changed shortly. So this is probably the same that happens with C, because the monkey already know that this is possible. And the two-chain experiment, even if the consolidation and the training was very longer than the A-B training of the first of a single series, the monkey knows that the C is possible for the C to be categorized differently. And this is what happens with the linking pair. At a certain point, I'm telling to the monkeys, C is also a winner, only when presented with D.
Right, exactly. Okay. But so then you're saying in the test phase itself, this might then mitigate this idea that it's an exception, that the monkey is just processing it as any other sequence, because as well, look, I might not get reward now, but maybe in the future.
This is what I believe. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then, now for symbolic distance, it's a term used also in the psychological literature, but in your task, is it reasonable to really speak of a symbol as you're using these patterns, and the monkey must also really react to the patterns as they're localized in space, right? They must really touch the screen at a certain XY position, and you could argue, well, a symbol might be a difficult concept to define, but the one thing is that it is an internal representation that is independent of the actual sensory state.
I think that the symbols are very large. They don't need to be precisely recognized. I mean, and not even the position on the touch screen need to be precisely coded. For the monkey, the response is left and right. It's the same of a key press.
Okay.
So, and what was the?
No, what I mean more is that it's more. Is it fair to call the pattern that you produce? You project a pattern.
Yeah, but the monkey, if you remember the video, the monkey is looking for the figure. It's not stay still on the pattern. I mean, it's not stay. It doesn't look at the pair. It looks for this figure.
Right.
And then there is another behavioral data that we haven't discussed. Is the eye movement.
Right. Okay.
We know that if the first figure that is foveated is the wrong one, then he moves the eye to the next one and then decide to move the arm.
Okay.
So there are other aspects of the behavior that need to be further explored.
Okay. But what I'm after here, maybe it's a completely irrelevant semantic concern I'm expressing. But you want to measure something called symbolic distance, but what you're using is also a spatially organized task with visual patterns that in themselves cannot be considered symbols. So what makes it symbolic?
I could agree that the term symbolic is not proper, but for me is the way to refer to something that is known to the literature.
Okay.
And I agree with you that probably a symbol is never created in this kind of a strategy that we are imposing to the animal. Because it's just to be complete, often in the animal study and even in human study, the symbol used before testing are always the same in a way that the subject create a symbolic representation of the symbol.
Exactly.
And actually, for some of the people that discuss a lot on the behavioral relevance of transitive inference, this is a necessary step.
Right. Okay.
But in our case, we want to avoid that the monkey was just using a well-coded symbol to conclude on the comparison between two symbols. And I think this is just maybe it's not the right one solution, but it's a way to reduce our.
No, look, I completely get it. Sure.
Our the number of factors that are there, because remember that then we try to correlate this behavioral data with a neural code.
Right.
And if we have very too many factors at the same time.
Of course. No, moreover, it might. So, as an operational definition of a symbol, I think it's completely defendable.
I agree.
But we just have to be clear about what we're.
So I agree with you that the symbolic distance in this case is not properly.
Okay, but now what you found is that if you look at the performance of the animal, so you look at the errors they make and their reaction times, then you see that they perform better on patterns or symbols, as we now can call them, that are in the middle of the sequence, as opposed to those that are at the beginning or the end of a sequence, right?
No, the performance is better for the anchor points, even for the one that include never reinforced.
Okay. So the beginning and the end.
The beginning and the end.
So how big is that modulation?
In terms of difference in percentage of performance,
correct,
I think twice.
So it's a big difference.
It's a big difference in the two animals that we tested.
Sure. But how do you explain that? Or what does that mean?
I think that this is a further evidence that the different symbols are organized relatively to each other. Around the two anchor points that are the A and F of the sequence, and maybe also the central one, that's the letter C. That and in at least in the human literature, this is a further evidence that a mental line is used, because sometimes people refer that to solve the task they do explore mentally the line by moving from the extremes toward the center to find the item that is required to be compared.
So if we interpret this as arranging now these symbols on the line, that would basically mean that, okay, I'm exposed to the task, I know now what the beginning and the end of my line is, and then now it's like I build a chain. Right now I can stick the elements on that line. Is that correct? That would be the idea.
Yeah.
But that's what's interesting, of course, that the two anchor points are in their quality radically different, because
exactly. This is a surprise. It's still we have a very similar behavior. That means that the behavior is not just explained by the reward.
That's exactly right. So do you see this as a form of latent learning for the endpoint? So this is learning without an explicit instruction?
Could be. Yeah, it could be a possibility. Yeah.
Could it also be a violation?
I named this a strategy because I think that the monkey need to have a solution, because every day is introduced in the lab. He doesn't know which figure will be used, but the monkey knows that he have to use this new figure to figure out how they are located relatively each other.
Right.
So it could be that just the monkey normally, spontaneously adapt to this allocation in the mental space of the symbols presented.
Right, exactly.
without any control.
Mm-hmm. But now this also, could you argue that this is like a segmentation of the task? Would you accept that? Or the task domain?
Let's say differently. I have no argument to conclude that this is not segmented.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's in favor of a segmentation.
Right. Because what is interesting then is that if in some sense the monkey is saying, okay, I have a problem to solve.
Yeah.
These experimenters only show me always a subset of the task I must solve. I have to figure it out myself. So I have to learn the boundaries. I have to figure out what are the boundaries of my task.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where do the relationships start and where do they stop? And in the performance, you see that actually a monkey is able to do that and also to draw very, very strict boundaries around that. But the strange thing is that this almost looks like a form of perceptual learning in the sense that it is an acquisition of knowledge about the task without explicit instruction, because the beginning gets reward and the end gets nothing, right? So do you see that as a separate kind of learning process that imposes boundaries on this local structuring of the task, or do you see it as an integrated process?
I believe that both are present, and because in the assumption that A is always reinforced and F is never, it's not easy to explain why A and B is so difficult and A and F is so difficult. So I think that there are two interfering process that works together. One is the tentative of the monkey to generalize, to organize the item according to the general rule that has been introduced by the experiment. The second one is that there is a conflict on the representation that is created.
Okay. And then, so now for this symbolic distance, which is the magnitude relationships that we are being trained on, like, or a binary relationship, then we have the serial order effect.
Yeah.
Right? How is the serial order effect or the serial distance effect different from the symbolic distance effect?
So the serial order is the phenomenon that we just described. That is the fact that the learned pair are not coded similarly with the U shape described, while the symbolic distance is the relationship with the distance of the symbol compared, in particular, for never matched symbols during the learning. So that could be named novel pair.
Right. So with that now in mind, you started to look at the neural substrate.
Yeah.
And you recorded in premotor cortex.
Oh, it's prefrontal cortex this time, but we do also have. I present today the data from prefrontal cortex. We do also have data from premotor. And the reason is that in the literature, that is mostly in the human literature, using imaging data. The evidence is that some of the area of the cortex, essentially the prefrontal cortex, the premotor cortex, and the posterior parietal cortex are involved to the transitive inference task. You know that the functional MRI doesn't provide the details to conclude what is the mechanism. So we only know that there are areas that are statistically activated.
Right, exactly.
While the subjects are tested in a similar task to the one that I use in the animal.
So what did you observe recording in prefrontal cortex?
So the observation that I think is very straightforward is that we have been able to find neurons that are modulated in a way similar, that is another way is to say they are correlated to the behavioral effect that our animal are able to show. So there are neurons modulated for the symbolic distance, other neurons are modulated for the serial position, a subpopulation of them, when analyzed at a single neuron, are modulated by both. I specified single population, a single neural level, because when the average activity of all the neurons task related are further investigated, then what emerges is that the population of neurons, that is about half of the total population we recorded with our movable electrode in the prefrontal cortex, is able to code both for the symbolic distance and the serial position effect. That is quite important, because the two phenomena could be separated in the brain as used differently by whatever code or the brain is using to solve the task, while being able to demonstrate that the same population is able to use both signals means that probably the one signal is dependent on the other.
Okay. But now, the numbers you listed were about 50% responsive for serial position, 40% for symbolic distance, and then there were a few neurons across these two pools that were responsive to both.
Yeah.
So like 30% or 20%?
Yes, 20% both.
Okay. So, but now how do we know that this actually scales up? Because what you really measured is you present the monkey now with a pair or pattern, let's say B and C or A and B. You record a neuron, and now you basically sort all your trials and say, okay, let's put all the trials together where I presented C as my first pattern to the left. And now I'm going to look at, okay, how do my neurons respond? And you will find the sensitivity of neurons to, let's say, C in the first position, right? And then you might find another neuron that says, okay, I like B in the second position, etc. But that basically, at this point, only tells us that we are representing in some form the discrete element or the elements of these sequences. So how do we know that this is the neural substrate of the inference we want to look at?
Okay, one of the limits of the approach is that neurophysiology in non-human primates with the method of electrophysiology is unable to conclude about causality. Okay, so the only possibility for a study exploring whatever behavior controlled in whatever experimental setup is to find a relationship between the controlled variable and the measured variable. So it's a relationship. So in our case, we found a strong relationship between a behavioral phenomenon, two behavioral phenomena. That is the symbolic distance and the serial position effect. Being unable to find such a relation will allow us to conclude that the neurons code or the firing rate of neurons in prefrontal cortex is unable to participate properly to the behavioral counterpart of the transitive inference task.
Right. Okay.
But we are unable, for the limitation of the method, to conclude that the prefrontal cortex is necessary and that the task is controlled selectively by that area. That actually is something that I don't believe and other people don't believe too in the area, because we know that patients with lesion at the level of the hippocampus or the prefrontal cortex or the parietal cortex has a different deficit, but always with the deficit that imply that these subjects are unable to solve a task like the transitive inference one.
Okay, but now tell me, if I look at the serial position versus symbolic distance, how is the neural response to the symbolic distance different from the serial position response? So if I would give you a neuron, a response profile of a neuron, and I say, well, we measured this neuron while the monkey was performing this task, would you be able to, just by looking at its response profile, say whether it does the serial position or the symbolic relation?
think that what the analysis at the level of the population tell us is that every neuron is able to provide a contribution to the two factors, but maybe sometimes too noisy to reach statistical significance. So the first numbers that I provided is that with a strong statistical support, there are neurons that are well coded for the symbolic distance, or they are well coded for the serial position, because this doesn't need only to have only one response different, but also to follow the model.
Yeah.
So you need to follow the model of the behavior, and because the requirements are too many for a single neuron, it could be too much. So the answer is that there are neurons that are more easy to. It's easier to find neurons in prefrontal cortex that, remember, is an area that often doesn't provide in the discharge rate code so much contribution. To say differently, neurons in prefrontal cortex are not the same of neurons in motor, premotor, or sensory areas. The amount of discharge of these neurons is very low often. Right. So this means that the signal is a noisy signal by definition, because if you discharge rate is 10 hertz, 10 spike per second, then the possibility to replicate by trial the same code is very difficult than when your neurons discharge 80, 100 hertz.
But it was surprising that some of the neurons you reported are at a relatively elevated firing rate. Like you reported neurons up to 50 hertz, which seems rather than exceptional for that area.
It's true, but I still consider up to 50 hertz a low rate.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So then, okay, here we have.
Anyway, in the delayed epoch, is where these neurons are more able to express themselves. Generally speaking, the delay epoch is where the prefrontal cortex has been often studied for one of the characteristics that is assigned to the prefrontal cortex, that is the working memory.
Right.
So the working memory is often very well able to activate these neurons.
Okay.
And the delay activity too.
So now we have our transitive inference task, and you show monkeys can do it. But now you have also taken this as a method if you want to look at certain neuropathologies, right, like schizophrenia. Yeah. So why is this relevant if we try to understand schizophrenia?
Let's say that this is just the beginning of a story that we started recently. The reason is our goal is to link pharmacology and the electrophysiology with different methods. In particular, the idea of this study that I present today is that it's well known that schizophrenic patients have deficit in solving the transitive inference task. And since there is a drug that is ketamine that has been used often in animal model to provide one of the support to one of the possible model of schizophrenia, that is the one related to the dopamine use in the brain. We tested if ketamine as a receptor agonist of the NMDA, that is one of the receptor of dopamine in the brain, it's able to modulate the behavioral response of the animal that we trained in the transitive inference. And the figure that comes out is that the answer is yes. The ketamine is able to reduce the efficiency of this animal to solve the task. And what is interesting is that the performance is particularly reduced in the figures that are transitive, considered transitive. That means those that are about comparison between never experience and furthermore those that doesn't not include the extreme spares that are others refer as a anchor point.
So, but what you see in the monkey was a degradation of performance.
Yeah, generally it was quite similar for all the comparison, but we further explored the data, and the result is that the statistical significance is particular for the comparison that are more related to the transitive inference capability.
Okay, but then
that was exactly what was observed in schizophrenic patients. So schizophrenic patient has no problem on concluding which one is has more value of A and B and C on A and F, including the anchor point, or B and F, because once again it doesn't include the anchor point. While when the question is which is higher between B and E, then the deficit emerge, and the same happens in our monkey under subanesthetic doses of ketamine.
But now, how do you explain that in terms of the action of ketamine?
Okay, I think it's one of the possibilities, once again, to believe that the way how the representation is on the brain at the level of the neurons is very noisy, and that the ketamine reducing the efficiency of dopamine is increasing the noise and then making more difficult to the comparison.
Okay. But now schizophrenia is also affecting, let's say, experience, subjective experience, right? So it has a very specific phenomenology as well. So do you believe that the same holds for the monkey? So in other words, is this task actually also informing us about the role of consciousness in decision making, or you see it really as disconnected from those phenomena?
I think it's very difficult to conclude such a. It's a very conclusion.
Because for me,
I mean, we have no evidence that the monkey has. It's really we know that the ketamine is a dissociative drug.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know how much is our dosage was able to really produce a monkey dissociated from the reality. Because we want to have the monkey still able to perform the task. Actually, the monkey was still performing the task with a good percentage of success.
Okay.
But the deficit was selected for a portion of the task, not for the whole task. No, but I don't know if this could be used. It's a very easy, I think, result. Might be too simple that to argument that maybe the monkey was consciously unable to participate to the transitive inference. That is a conclusion.
No, that would not be my conclusion. My conclusion would be more like, if you use this paradigm as a way to also investigate schizophrenia, is it then not by implication the case that we are implicitly also probing conscious states and conscious operations in this monkey, and not only logical ones?
It need to be explored.
Of course, no, it's clear.
Yeah. Since the drug is able to modulate consciousness, it's by definition one of the possibilities.
Exactly right. That was my point.
I agree with you.
So basically the conclusion then is that, you also on top of that showed, which was very interesting, that if you now in this task go to a next level of description of the physiology of the monkey brain, which is the local field potential, that you also find correlates there of this transitive inference. So what did you observe there exactly?
Okay, for us the analysis of local field was a direct consequence of the observation in humans that fMRI is modulated by the transitive comparison in a transitive inference task. And since it's commonly accepted that the most close neurophysiological signal to the bold activity of fMRI is the local field, for us it was very important to look also to the local field modulation during the task. So it probably was not a surprise anymore after finding that the single neuron firing rate was modulated, to find that also that the local field was modulated. But it's also important to to show evidence of this, because some way put the again the level of the multi-scale, that means local computation, remote computation, that need to be further studied in the future, because local field has access to the synaptic integration, so we don't know from where the signals comes, and to local reverberation from at the level of the gamma. Even if we haven't been able to show a strong effect at the level of the gamma in the local field, but at the level of the low components that are those more related to the input from the thalamus or from the other cortical area like the hippocampus, once again, or the posterior parietal region.
But you seemed to show that the deflections in this local field potential correlated very specifically with properties of the task.
Absolutely. Right? Actually, we have been able to find a very strong relationship more with the local field than with a single unit. And the reason could be different. One is that the single neuron express their contribution with different tuning forms. Sometimes where with a shape very similar to the performance, like in the serial position, a U shape. Other time they was inverted, and as I say before, the noisy level of the single unity was sometimes too much to reach significance. So also the time in the task from the pair presentation to the decision time, that is after the go signal during a delay, for the single neuron was never, I'll say, often not the same. I mean that the single neuron are able to express their contribution at the beginning of the delay, at the middle part of the delay, or the late portion of the delay. While for the local field, it was very time locked to the pair presentation at about 400 milliseconds.
Right.
And this allowed to extract probably a better signal to find a correlation as the one we found.
But it's interesting to see that you don't have such a tight correlation with your single cell recording. So would that suggest that there's another dynamic process at work that shapes this local field potential? Like other synaptic activities that you don't pick up with your single cell measurements that shape the local field potential?
Yeah, the single unit activity is really local. Okay, while the local field, by definition, is able to sample at least a volume that is huge compared to the single unit. So for sure, the conclusion is that we are not looking at the same computational level.
Right.
No? So, and actually the better performance of the single unit coding is when the neurons are considered together forming a population. Local field is by definition a mesoscopic approach.
Yeah.
And so this is probably expected that if a signal is there, it's much easier to be found and maybe correlated with behavior.
Right. So the experiment you described basically suggests that the monkey that we investigate, and possibly also humans, organize the information that they need in this transitive inference task on a line of magnitude relations in some sense. And this line is very, very well demarcated at the beginning and the end. Okay?
Correct.
So how long can those sequences be, you think, for the monkey?
For our monkey, I think that they need to vanish soon. However, I haven't shown this data today, but we asked the monkey some time to play with the series of that was learned the day before, and the series is still there. Even if the monkey knows that it's better for him to have a very good performance, to forget completely what was the assignment of figures the day before, because they are never used.
Right, exactly.
But once again, there is something that is implicit, probably. There's something there. I'm not thinking to use them, but if I'm asked to use, I'm ready to.
Right,
And
exactly.
the performance was very rapid and perfect the day after. We have no tested other days. I mean, 2 days or 3 days.
Right.
So I don't know how long it
that's
remains.
Pretty astonishing, yeah. But then the other thing is, so there's this famous, or the snark effect that Stan DeHaan has written a lot about and others, which shows that also humans, when they have to deal with magnitude judgments, let's say something is bigger or smaller than something else and so on, that there's a very specific spatial bias. Right? So for instance, if you have to respond with your left hand, you respond more quickly to small, lower magnitudes, and with the right hand, you're faster when the magnitude is higher. Also suggesting that there is some spatial organization of magnitude judgments. And what I found interesting about that is if we compare that to your results, you interpret your results, as also the title of your talk suggested, as the ability to perform logical operations, right? But in some sense, I could also argue, well, look, maybe this is all just spatially organized, and I use associative rules, I use analog reasoning, if you want, to then make these magnitude judgments. So is it really necessary to interpret your results in terms of logical operations?
It's just the definition of logic. Maybe you, as a psychologist, if I'm not wrong, by training, your definition of logic is much more strong than the one that I'm using at the moment. And I agree that the monkey is using a space as a model to solve a task. If the solution of this task is logic, is a term of definition, and in my point, is logic whatever is more than what was available by the information provided at the beginning.
Sure. I understand.
So it's not a level of logic that is probably in your mind,
right?
But it's of course, first level of be able to conclude if then.
Right.
It's very elementary, but remember that these are non-human primates.
Yes.
And as an animal, we don't know if they are able to. We have no argument to conclude that they are, in particular for non-verbal conclusion, able to have a to use arguments properly to obtain new information.
Right. No, but it also means that maybe what you're showing us here is an alternative way how we can think about cognitive operations that give rise to behavior regularities that we as observers can interpret in logical terms, but that actually follow very different principles. And the same might hold for our own cognitive operations, right? That we also then, let's say now, a posteriori, describe them as logical operations. But that actually, in terms of the internal operations, it's much more an analog, spatially organized process. I mean, would you consider that still as an open option?
I agree with this. Actually, it's a behavior experiment that we performed in humans, but I think it's important to describe at this point. At the beginning of our testing and with the animals, we asked normal subjects at the students' level of age to perform a transitive inference task while changing their gaze. So looking at the left or to the right. So for the visual attributes of the symbols and the primary goal of the subject was not related at all with the gaze, but still the gaze is able to interfere as ketamine with the subject performance.
Okay.
So looking left or right in a whatever, it's like changing a reference frame for a mental operation.
Right, exactly.
It's not a logical operation. Maybe I agree with you, but it's a mental operation in the terms that in a space that is not physical, these symbols need to be represented.
Right.
And this space could be modulated by a physical signal, that is the angle of gaze that normally is well known to be able to modulate visual response in the space.
Exactly right. No, so we're saying the same thing, right? And I think it's also on that account that I find that your results, I think, are very exciting. But now, so you're active in neuroscience, systems neuroscience. You look at these really complex processes, logical operations in monkeys, whether they are intrinsically logical or not. It's very interesting and very exciting. You started as a neurologist, switching over into neuroscience. So if we would like to follow the study of the brain in the tradition of Stefano Ferraina, what would be the Stefano law of the study of the brain?
I think that is a little bit far from some rules that are currently available at the financing level in Europe.
Okay.
I want first to know exactly how the brain works, and then maybe to model it, to understand properly, and to translationally apply to this knowledge to pathology.
Okay. So, and then predictions. So soon I'm going to come to Rome 4 years from now. I'm going to go to your lab, and I'm going to ask you, okay, 4 years ago, you gave me this prediction. Show me whether you tested it and what was the outcome. So what's the one prediction you would make today that you feel most committed to?
For the 4 years, next 4 years?
4 years, yes.
Okay, let's consider first that monkey experiments, primate experiments in general are very slow. So in 4 years, I will be able probably to complete just one experiment. Or let's say to have one finished, the second one at the middle of the trip. So, but the next for me, it will be to be able to record from many areas on the brain simultaneously. In this task and other task that I'm using at the moment in the lab, we are using in the lab, and at the same time to have access to different level of the neural signal to provide a better decode to the to whatever is going on in the population of neurons, so controlling the behavior that I'm interested. So in particular for the transitive inference task, we are already studying the premotor cortex, and the goal is to go to the posterior parietal, following what is the network described in humans, and by having access to a high resolution signal to provide details on what is still unknown on the possibility of the brain to provide support to such a behavior.
But that seems very methodological. Do you have a specific prediction you're testing in doing this?
The prediction is that but it's not, it's not common to it's not very singular, but I still believe that need to be it's not very original, but still I believe it need to be confirmed properly that the behavior like the one that I'm studying need to be coordinated by different areas. I would like to find the key of how this coordination happens.
Okay, great. Stefano Ferraina, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you, Paul.
The CSN podcast was produced by the Convergent Science Network of Biomimetics and Biohybrid Systems, a project funded by the European 7th Research Framework Programme. For more interviews, recorded lectures, or upcoming conferences in the field of biomimetics and biohybrid systems, go to csnnetwork.eu. And thank you for listening.